Support for this program is provided by
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm One Detroit News and Current Events producer, Will Glover, and this is the first monthly Future of Work Town Hall. We'll have in-depth conversations about how we need to reimagine our workforce, workplaces, and the work itself to make Michigan a top 10 state. Today, we'll be talking about the jobs Michigan has now, the jobs we'll need tomorrow, and who will be doing them. Joining me to help dig into this conversation today is Crain's Detroit senior editor, Chad Livengood. Chad, how are you doing today?
Hey, thanks for having me, Will. Doing good. Working remotely.
Yeah. You had a few technical difficulties, but we got that sorted out. We're here to have this conversation. Where I'd like to start is basically just getting, setting the table a little bit. So the first thing I'll do is go over some of the rankings that we hear so much about, we see so much about, and we'll talk about that for just a second. So according to Forbes, who ranks Michigan 40 based on when they look at the GDP of the state for 10 years, 5 years, quarter over quarter, like I said, they have us coming in at 40. The U.S. News has us 22nd in business environment, 41st in employment, and 25th in growth. Overall, rich states, poor states has us ranked 30th. CNBC has us 11th, and my favorite is Thrillist, which has us at number 1, but that may not be the most accurate depiction of the state. So my first question to you is, does this matter? Do rankings really play that big of a role in how our state's perceived, and might that affect our business competitiveness?
Yeah, it does in terms of self-perception of our state, and that's what a lot of the game is right now. Particularly when you're a policymaker, you want to look at these data and you want to be able to benchmark Michigan versus other states. Right now, there is, at least in my mind, sort of an obsession with some of the southern states that are seemingly on the rise, particularly when it comes to the automotive industry. Just think about back in last fall when Ford Motor Company announced they're going to invest $11 billion in 4 different plants in Kentucky and Tennessee. That got a lot of policymakers out of their seats, because here's a hometown automaker building a new electric vehicle assembly plant near Memphis with a battery plant, and then more battery plants around south of Louisville, Kentucky, in order to spur the next generation of automotive innovation with EVs. And so that they looked at some of the people want to look at some of the stats related to those states to see what is Tennessee doing that we're not doing. A common thing people talk about is, well, they have a lower income tax, or Florida doesn't have an income tax. Everyone always wants to gauge against that. I think you have to kind of go back and look at educational attainment and focus less on what is the tax policy and get a little more focused on where do Michigan workers stand as far as being prepared in the workplace to compete with other workers in other states and other countries. And that the pandemic has greatly disrupted that. You can be a software engineer in Marquette, Michigan. You do not have to be a software engineer and live in Royal Oak and commute to a job at the GM Warren Tech Center anymore. Correct. GM will hire you, and it doesn't matter where you live, basically, as long as you have a good internet connection, which I was struggling with myself today. But you can get by and do these jobs remotely increasingly. And so now it's just a matter of where do we position Michigan so people want to live here, raise their kids here. And when it comes to raising your kids and education quality, we are not a top 10 state. We are closer to a bottom 10 state, and yes. what's really kind of increasingly concerning for people as we're sort of looking at the long-term trajectory of the state.
Right. And so because we have been so accustomed to having the automotive industry and kind of, owning that those jobs and how that innovation goes to a degree, not anymore with, electric vehicles. Before we get into talking about developing talent and, what we could be, what was the last time where Michigan was in a really good position where we were, leading the country, if we were leading the country, when it comes to our business competitive, to our wages, to, the places that people were able to live and enjoy and raise their families?
Yeah, I mean, on business competitive, all the different scales, we are vastly better than we were, to say the least. A big part of that is tax policy. Think back to 2011 when then Republican Governor Rick Snyder and the Republican legislature got rid of what it was called the Michigan business tax and went to a simplified 6% corporate income tax. And it was a $1.8 billion a year tax cut for businesses. They've made major reforms for property taxes for businesses. There has been an immense number of policies that have boosted the business climate for Michigan, which, some of those rankings said we're 22nd. We were 42nd 10 years ago. I mean, we were in the bottom 10 then, for sure. But this educational attainment is really starting to creep up on us, and some of our panelists will get into that today, because we are just lagging the region. And for our major city, Detroit, and Metro Detroit, the metropolitan area, it's just lagging other comparable metropolitan areas. When you compare us against Atlanta, Minneapolis, even Cleveland, we just have fewer adults with bachelor's degrees, and that is spelling trouble long term for both the diversification of our economy and also maintaining that automotive industry dominance. I mean, we saw that with the departure of Rivian, this major startup electric vehicle company that packed up and kind of moved to Irvine, California in the middle of the pandemic. General Motors is out. They went and bought an autonomous vehicle company in San Francisco called Cruise that now employs 2,500 people in San Francisco. In the Bay region, those aren't engineers and software developers working out of the Warren Tech Center or Detroit Renaissance Center. They're working on the West Coast effectively for General Motors now, and that's to me a siren people have to be kind of concerned about.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head, which is why when it comes to our educational attainment and our competitiveness in that area, we have with us today Britany Affolter-Caine, who's the executive director of the University Research Corridor, as well as Jennifer Llewellyn, the director of the Oakland County Michigan Works. Ladies, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Having us.
So where I'd like to start is, Chad, you were kind of alluding to it. There's a lot of movement going on. It feels like we're losing grip on an industry that we've had, which, could lead to us losing out on other opportunities and our ability to innovate and stay competitive. So, Jennifer, we can start with you. What to you makes this time right now so urgent for us to get these kinds of things right?
Chad hit the nail on the head when he was covering the opportunities and the pain points and challenges. And anytime we come out of an economic disruption, it's a great opportunity for individuals to reassess, businesses to reassess, government, education to reassess what are the opportunities. And when you look at the electrification of vehicles, when you look at Industry 4.0, you look at the transformation that the healthcare industry has endured over the last few years, there's a real appetite right now for individuals to pursue new opportunities, to pursue post-secondary education. The governor's 60 by 30 goal to have 60% of Michigan residents with an industry recognized degree or credential, really set the bar high. In Oakland County, County Executive Dave Coulter set the Oakland 80 goal, an ambitious goal to have 80% of Oakland County residents with that certificate or degree. And programs like Michigan Reconnect that are offering free community college tuition to any Michigan resident 25 or older. As difficult as COVID was and the pandemic was, and as much of a disruption as that caused the workforce and particularly challenges for our businesses, this is a really, really exciting time looking forward, at least from a workforce development perspective, for us to provide some transformational solutions for the future of work and future opportunities for employers.
Right. And so, Britany, same question from your perspective, from the research corridor's perspective. What makes this time right now so urgent, and why do we need to get this right?
Well, I think there's been a number of smart folks who have looked at the labor market and understand that fundamentally our labor market has changed, even in a manufacturing state like Michigan, where the vast majority of jobs are going to require, or already do, a 4-year or advanced degree. And that's true here, it's true across the country. And, we always hear anecdotes, well, so-and-so, you can do this job, you don't need a college degree, but chances are you need some form of training. I like to say that maybe not everyone has to go to college, but college is for everyone. And if we are going to compete in this current labor market and compete with other states and other countries, we absolutely have to make peace with the fact that many of us, more than today, need to have a 4-year degree or advanced degree to be able to keep pace with our core industries and additional emerging industries coming in. And we have a number of challenges with that. I wanted to also pick up on something that Chad had said, being a bottom 10 state. And while we are focused on talking about talent, I think it's important to also recognize that, and why this is important right now is we have a population challenge. We're seeing demographics moving out of Michigan, and with them, whether they are talented or skilled labor, or what have you. And so we're having a population challenge in addition to a talent challenge, and they go hand in hand. And so we've certainly seen this. We do a number of benchmarking. We do benchmarking every year. Our 3 universities, Michigan State, the University of Michigan, and Wayne State, compared to trios of clusters elsewhere, places like Boston's Route 128 and North Carolina's Research Triangle and Silicon Valley. And we always come out on top in terms of talent. Enrollment, which is around 155,000 a year at our institutions. We used to come out on top in degrees awarded, more than 37,000. We have started to see some of the other clusters in California and Texas start to eat into our competitiveness in that space. And so that should raise alarm bells to all of us that we have to deal with these demographic challenges, and we have to come up with new solutions to address it.
Right. And so, Chad, maybe you can speak to this, but, the floor is open for anyone. One of the things that I think also adds to the urgency of this moment, outside of, the fact that we're coming out of hopefully once in a generation pandemic, is the influx of federal dollars, and the influx of federal dollars with the combination of, I guess it depends on what you want to call it, the great reorganization or the great resignation. But I'm just curious, how do those factors play into this moment being so, rife for opportunity?
Well, there's multiple billions of dollars to spend on initiatives. The concern in Lansing is that if you start some new program, or initiative, you don't want to get caught with the long-term costs. So the lawmakers are taking a very, very long time on some of this spending, because they're trying to figure out things that they can do that will help the state long-term, whether it's in infrastructure. They just did an infrastructure bill, but that's one example. Things that are one-time expenses, so they're not getting stuck with new programs. I mean, one of the ideas that's been floated out there as far as as talent goes, is bring back some type of state financial aid. Michigan ranks like 49th, and Britany would know for sure, but 49th or 50th in the country in state taxpayer financial aid. College is just simply unaffordable for almost anybody in the lower middle class, even the middle class now of families, and so this is increasingly a big problem. We got universities.
Oh no, we might be losing you, Chad.
Rate and
yeah, give us 1 second, Chad. I think we're losing you. But Britany, as he was saying and addressing the investment dollars going towards higher education, can you speak to that? Where do we land in that category?
Yeah. So Chad's right. We're 50th. We literally can do no worse in terms of financial aid, need-based financial aid to our residents. And so that's an area that we could certainly and we should be making a big difference in. The other thing is that we've seen over the last several decades, and Michigan's not alone in this, but we certainly have done our best at this, is changed the amount of support in state dollars for our institutions of higher learning, which has basically shifted the burden of the cost from being 70%, we the taxpayers paid and invested in our students and graduates, to now only about 30%, meaning the people to make up that difference are the students and their families. They're now paying 70% versus 30% just a few decades ago. And that is a real problem. If we are serious about anyone who wants to go to college, the college is for everyone who wants it, we need to make it affordable.
Right. And when it comes to the Great Resignation or the reorganization, Jennifer, is that something that you were seeing? Has there been an influx in people trying to change fields or just, I guess, rethink their whole approach to what they would like their career to be?
Yeah, it's actually been fascinating. In Michigan alone in January, 143,000 Michiganders resigned from their jobs. We've lost over 200,000 women in the workforce over the course of the pandemic. And it's really critical that we have labor force participation. That's the pain point that our employers are feeling right now. They can't find the talent that they need. A colleague of mine used the term the great upgrade. And I love that terminology because it's positive and it really reflects to your point earlier on the federal dollars that are available. This is a great opportunity for the state to take a step back and say, what are some strategic investments that we can make in talent and workforce development that could be really transformational? We've proposed an investment in short-term industry recognized credentials and certifications, IT positions in cybersecurity, truck driving, which is a top in-demand job right now, apprenticeship programming. Those are short-term investments where individuals can earn competitive industry recognized credentials. We have funding through the Michigan Works system to provide the cost of those training programs, but those are federal dollars with some eligibility restrictions that are tied to that. But, could the state make a significant investment in some short-term training programs to get those individuals that have been sidelined, particularly persons of color, underrepresented populations, veterans, individuals with disabilities? How do we get them the skills that they need to be competitive? How do we make sure that they have the wraparound services like childcare, transportation, housing assistance, and other things to make sure that that's there, helping them through that transition and getting them back in the workforce?
Right. So before we continue down this road, one of the things that I was curious about that we spoke about a little bit before we got started that I would just, like to hear from you guys if you're willing to share. But, and Britany, we can start with you. But how is this personal to you? What makes you guys do the work? Because in a little bit, we're going to see, a little bit of the work that your organizations do. But what makes you want to do this work? How does it touch your lives? Britany, we can start with you.
Okay. I'm a first generation student. I grew up in a working class Family, I don't know, maybe we should be calling it Alice threshold, but regardless, it was tough. My parents made big sacrifices for me to go to college and to keep on moving on up. And so when I do the work that I'm, not only am I passionate about the research component of my three institutions in particular, because they are shaping industries and bringing more opportunities to the state through those innovations, and they're improving lives at multiple levels and intersections. So that's important, but it's the talent piece. When I see so many people like myself who are making their way in and finding a field where they can have an impact, that's really important. And so that's a big piece of why I'm really passionate about this. And I understand when people say, it's really expensive to go. I don't know if it's for us. I don't know if I need a college degree for my career. And the answer in the aggregate, most of the time is yes. And however I can help communicate that, the better.
Right. And Jennifer, you also shared a story earlier.
Yeah, so in 1997, my parents lost their jobs about 6 months apart from each other. My dad worked in a manufacturing facility for many years, had a successful career there, went to work one day and the doors were padlocked. And 6 months later, my mom, who was an administrative assistant for a manufacturing company, they closed the manufacturing facility and moved it to Canada. And so here I was in college, my brother was in high school, and both parents were out of work. And they utilized the Michigan Works office in Troy, met a great team there that were helping them through that transition. And I went there one day with them and talked to the staff, and I was looking for a job myself, and accepted a 3-month internship there. So I was going to work there for 3 months. 24 years later, here I am. But for me, the passion behind the workforce development work comes from the experience that my family had. And as we develop these programs and initiatives, there's a human being on the other side of that. So when we talk about legislation and policy and investment, it's so important to never lose sight that there is a family that is trying to make ends meet. They're trying to put food on the table. They're trying to better themselves. And for me, now at the administrative level, anytime we're implementing a new program, a new policy, a new initiative, I never lose sight of the fact that we're changing lives here, and we're transforming cycles of poverty and in creating opportunities and economic self-sufficiency for people that may have not had that before. So just never losing sight of that.
Right. And thank you guys for sharing, because I think it's important that people know, for anyone who's watching, that the people who are doing the work and putting in the effort to try and solve these problems are, actually connected and have some skin in the game, if you will. But with that, before we move on to the next portion of our discussion, we'll take a quick look at what your organizations do. But for anyone watching, please take time to fill out our survey. It should be in the comments, and we also encourage you to send in your comments, questions, critiques, whatever it might be. Feel free to put that into the comments. But for now, we'll take a look at what the University Research Corridor does, as well as what Oakland County Michigan Works does.
Oakland County Michigan Works is a no-cost service that helps people find meaningful employment. So we offer career planning services that can include career exploration, skills and interests and aptitudes assessments. We can help fund training if that's a need that they have. We can offer case management, wraparound services, mentorship opportunities. We've helped folks maybe that are on the verge of eviction, right? They may already have a job, they may have gotten sick and had time off work and weren't paid. So we help folks, in that circumstance. We help folks maybe that found a job, but they don't have enough money to pay for that upfront cost of childcare for the first few weeks. So we can help fill that gap. So we're really doing a lot of great work, right? That is life-changing for folks in our communities. And that's really refreshing to know that we're able to do that. We're also helping businesses, right? So if they're expanding, helping them figure out what their workforce needs might be and how we can help them fill those needs as well. We also help employers with their recruitment, hiring, and training needs of their workforce. So by working with employers and working with the folks that need jobs, we can really do a good job of connecting the two together.
The University Research Corridor is an alliance of Michigan State University, the University of Michigan, and Wayne State University. They are the state's R1 research-intensive institutions. The URC leads in mobility, and it also leads in medicine. We granted 12,000 degrees in biomed, biotech, and 2,500 medical degrees in this last year as well. We have more graduates in the mobility industry than any other research cluster across the nation. So we had about nearly 15,000 grads in those high interest mobility spaces, more than California, more than Texas, more than Massachusetts. We have a presence in every single county in the state of Michigan. And so our engagement are the folks we employ, the folks that do research. Every single county in the state, we have a real impact in.
All right, and that was the University Research Corridor, as well as Oakland County Michigan Works. If you're just tuning in, this is the Future of Work Town Hall. I'm Will Glover. I'm being joined by Chad Livengood of Detroit Crains, as well as Britany Affolter-Caine of the URC, and Jennifer Llewellyn of Oakland County Michigan Works. So you guys are obviously doing the work that it takes to develop the talent and get people into the types of jobs that we would like to see in Michigan's future. So as we're thinking about that, I guess the biggest question is, how do we create the talent that we will need that will draw business here? And, Chad, I'll start with you from your perspective, because you do a lot of coverage around business and you have insight into how companies and just the business landscape thinks about talent.
Yeah, well, it might be good to all kind of go back a little bit of history. 100 years ago, Michigan was one of the leading rising states in the Union because we had this revolutionary invention called the automobile, and it was attracting tens of thousands of people out of the South, whites, blacks, Latinos, coming for work. And it's how Detroit had 2 million people by 1950, and it fueled much of our growth. We haven't, as a state, really grown population-wise since 1970. Essentially, we've been flatlined at 10 million people. As a region, we've been flatlined at about 4.4 million people in Southeast Michigan. And although we do have way fewer automotive jobs, I mean, in the height of 1950, there was something on the neighborhood of 150,000 some odd auto jobs in the city of Detroit, and in Flint there was like 60,000 jobs in GM factories. In Flint there's fewer than 5,000 jobs today, and in Detroit, at the three remaining automotive assembly plants between Chrysler and Stellantis, as they call it now, and General Motors, there's somewhere around 12 or 15,000 at best with suppliers. So it is greatly reduced and diminished and different than it was then. And over time, we have diversified our economy in some ways, and that's really increasingly more important. If you want to be the next state where the migration comes, you have to do something that's going to attract people. And typically that is work. A lot of people left this state after the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. They went south for jobs. They went to Texas, they went to Florida, they went to Tennessee. Some of it was survival. Some came back, but we haven't really done anything to kind of market Michigan to move back here or live here long term. I haven't seen anything. And pure Michigan ads are nice, but we spend like in the neighborhood of $25 million a year as a state advertising a weekend or a week in Grand Haven. It's not a real major emphasis on living here long term, raising a family. And the part of that is that we just don't have a lot to brag about in some of those fashions. I mean, some of those areas. We have more failing schools than successful schools, and we have some of the worst infrastructure in America, and we have just a lack of investment in both those. If you and I look back to 2017. When Amazon and Jeff Bezos put out this audacious proposals saying, "Hey, if you want to build, we want to build a second headquarters somewhere. We're going to put 50,000 jobs in some town," and this the leadership in this town got around, in the state got around a real coherent proposal to bring Amazon HQ2 to Detroit. Now, we didn't even make the top 20, but what it did, I mean, I still have this book on my desk at Crain's. It's amazing the sort of blueprint we thought of a big picture thinking about having 50,000 tech workers here. Unfortunately, all we are focused on right now is Amazon warehouse workers, and that doesn't require a college degree typically. It does require a college degree to create all the robots inside the Amazon warehouse, but we just have less emphasis on the guys creating the robots than the guy packaging and taping the box, and even that job is going away. I mean, so I just kind of, my emphasis to policymakers, I'm writing about this, is why are we not thinking about, long term, what is it that people are actually going to need to be do, and that's going to usually require your brain, typically. And the more brain power focused jobs we have, all we need to do as a region is go back to what Amazon told us. We don't have enough people with college degrees. We don't have enough people with advanced college degrees. The people we do have, the number one source of engineers, graduates at Amazon headquarters in Seattle is the University of Michigan engineering program. The number one source of masters in business administration is also the University of Michigan. I mean, Amazon has been just basically coming to Ann Arbor and East Lansing and probably Wayne State as well, and just draining out some of the best talent. Amazon, Intel, Facebook, Microsoft. Our own Lieutenant Governor, Garland Gilchrist, got a computer engineering degree at U of M and went straight to Redmond, Washington, right out of college, and worked for Microsoft. We know this has been going on. We know people have been going to Chicago and such. But what are we doing to retain those folks, keep them in the state? What kind of creative ideas are there if you come and get a college degree in Michigan? I mean, I recently wrote about, for our Crain's Forum section, a big picture focus on how the Ford project at Corktown, building this autonomous vehicle mobility campus, is more important long term than chasing after another battery plant project. And the subsidy that we are shelling out for sub $55,000 a year jobs at battery plants or manufacturing plants in Oakland and Eaton County. $666 million going to General Motors and their battery partner. For that price, we could train somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 engineers at the University of Michigan tuition. So if we spread it across all of our universities, we probably could train 20,000 engineers. Imagine if we spent $700 million of that stimulus money we're sitting on right now, training engineers and saying, if you get a college degree in Michigan as an engineer or one of these high-tech fields or software developer, we will pay for it. And you just have to live here for 5 years afterwards, and then you're debt free from the state of Michigan. The stimulus that would cause, the people that would move here. And we don't need this is not an experiment. We have living proof in Kalamazoo. What happens when you tell people that you can get a college degree paid for? The Kalamazoo Promise is completely been vetted out as a concept that actually has worked out. City Kalamazoo has great economic rebound from the Kalamazoo Promise, where the guaranteed college tuition. Families moved back into the city. They repopulated. They reinvested in neighborhoods. They rebuilt homes and such, and it actually has paid off for that. And we could do that on a grander scale in Michigan. We just got to start thinking a little bigger here.
Right. And so obviously we do have solutions that are viable. Jennifer, you wanted to jump in on this same question as to how we create talent, and we'll obviously get to the retention as well as the attraction, that, two things that you also mentioned, Chad, but Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, Chad for governor, like that was everything we've talked about in the workforce development space for the last however many years. But, we talk about creating talent. It's a shared mission, right? Where the employers are responsible for it. Education, both K-12 education and post-secondary education are responsible. Government is responsible around investment. And what are our long-term sustainable strategies to create the talent, not just now that employers need, but into the future? And I think, when we look at some of the successful initiatives we've had in Oakland County around creating talent, it's when we have all three pillars at the table. So for example, we had feedback a few years ago from our robotics companies and our automation companies that they were in desperate need of robotics technicians. So our team, we sat down with Oakland Community College, we sat down with the employers, and collectively created a PLC and robotics certification program. Individuals earn industry recognized credentials and certificates. The employers were at the table to help advise on the curriculum. We cover the cost of the tuition through grants and programs that we have, and the employers are at the end hiring these individuals. So we've now trained well over 200 individuals in the program. They're getting placed anywhere between $18 to $25 an hour, some as high as $34 an hour. So it's a real solution where you're creating talent. Another great example is in the apprenticeship space. We launched a medical assistant apprenticeship program in partnership with Henry Ford Health System. So it's a great opportunity. People earn and learn. They're employees of Henry Ford Health System. We're covering the cost of their tuition and training on the job. The employer has the benefit. The individual has the benefit. And to Chad's point earlier, when you invest in education, whether it's certificate training or degree training, the economic impact of that across the board, it creates better communities, it creates economic self-sufficiency, it makes our businesses more robust. Investment in workforce development, obviously, is a personal passion of mine, but it's really to understand that workforce development is economic development, and that investment of time and resources and energy towards increasing the number of individuals with degrees and credentials is so critical.
Right. So we have a question coming in. Ed on Facebook wants to know, when it comes to retaining the talent, how much of a factor is the quality of life here in Michigan? Britany, I'll let you handle that one.
Yeah, I love this question. We did a report recently on mobility and the talent we produce in mobility. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 graduates each year in degrees that are in high demand by the mobility industry, more than any of the other clusters we compare to. And I get excited about it. And the very first question I get is, well, how many are staying? Right. So let's dig into that. It's really important. Universities prepare students for work, for being employed anywhere in the world. We do, however, we're good stewards. We live here. Michigan is our home. And so we want to make sure we are building really important relationships and pipelines to employers here in the state. And all three of my institutions are engaged. And then I know universities across the state are public and private. I think it's also important that we extend the conversation beyond just the recent college graduate to think about all of the alumni and the continuum of the career and what would attract them home. A few jobs ago, I was a talent director for Ann Arbor Spark, and I can't tell you how often I got requests from folks who were looking to come home after having been in California or Texas or Boston or wherever, because this is a good place to raise their family. And so, we got to think about the entire continuum. I like to ask people when I go and speak, I said, do you know, we have just my institutions, we have 1.3 million living alumni. how many do you think live in Michigan? And I get questions, 1%, 5%. Someone gets really wily and they say 10%. And I have to say, no cookie for you. It's 50%. It's 50% solidly. So we do a pretty good job. It isn't necessarily right out of college, but they do come home like our lieutenant governor. And so we need to expand our thinking about talent in that way, because a lot of our employers, they don't need somebody right out of college. They need somebody with experience. And so that's another avenue for us.
Right. And so I think we've all touched on it a little bit in some way, but I think one of the overarching questions with all of this for anyone who's listening, watching, who may not be steeped in, the goings on of, development like this, the question really comes down to, how are people going to experience the fruits of the labor when it comes to workforce development? So if we did have an influx of college educated people working in knowledge industries, or if we did have, if we did luck up and get some sort of, giant headquarters for a tech company, how are people going to experience that in their daily lives? Because it's one thing to say it, it's one thing to see that there are programs and hear that people are going through them, but a lot of people aren't, or don't feel like, or maybe aren't aware that it's what they're experiencing is the result of these things. So what does it look like if we do this successfully, if we invest in the right things, if we help educate our future employees? What does that look like? I mean, we can start with Chad. We can start with you again, and then we'll go Britany and Jennifer, and then we'll have to, unfortunately, wrap it up. We could talk about this for hours, I'm sure.
Well, we have two, I would say, clear-cut examples, maybe even three. One is Rocket Mortgage, Quicken Loans. They were a growing but still small 4,000 or 5,000 employee mortgage company out in Livonia, in the office parks of Livonia, when Dan Gilbert moved the company downtown around 2010. And now there's like somewhere in the neighborhood of 17,000 employees in downtown Detroit. The company that's largely a result of its growth, and also Dan buying up like every vacant office building along Woodward Avenue that he could get his hands on. But that brought a reinvigoration to the downtown core, and it brought more people. I mean, the company never releases data, but I've run into so many countless Quicken employees over the years who moved here from. They went to UCLA. They got recruited. They started at Quicken in an office in Phoenix, and they got transferred to Detroit. I mean, that's one example. They're a competitor in the wholesale market up the road in Pontiac, United Wholesale Mortgage. They also have had similar success in having a job set that requires a certain type of skill set, and attracting people to the state. And then Grand Rapids, greater downtown Grand Rapids. This old politics guy from Grand Rapids, Peter Secchio, once told me a story. Predates my own birth, but when Gerald Ford got the nomination to be president in 1976, he had to put on Peter had to organize a parade for President Ford after he got the Republican nomination to run, and they had to go building by building with the Secret Service and staff them, because there was so many vacant buildings in downtown Grand Rapids. The work that has been done to turn around downtown Grand Rapids, make it an attractive place to live, work, and play, is a model that could be replicated on smaller scales. And that's one of our challenges is we've got some pocketed places, people with tech jobs and white collar workers go to live in sort of pockets of Oakland County, Ann Arbor, Grosse Pointe. We've got a lot of cities that need a lot of influx of people to revitalize them. We've got just vast amounts of suburbs that are really starting to look more and more disinvested and abandoned by the years. And so we need programs to revitalize those cities in between the Madison Heights and Clawsons and St. Clair Shores and Dearborn Heights of our region. They all need some love, and that's going to require investment in infrastructure and an investment in placemaking in order to make them places that people want to move to and that have affordable housing. We haven't even gotten to that discussion, but right now, if you are working you're a bartender in Traverse City, you make a pretty good living on the weekends, attending bar with people with money coming from other parts of the country, Chicago and such. But you have a hard time finding a place to live. And we just have land use policies that have not kept up with where the demand is, for workers. We just did a story this week in Crain's. Dustin Welsh did an in-depth piece on the little town of Everett, 20 miles north of Big Rapids. It is the home of Loom Cannabis Company's massive grow and processing plant for Michigan's very budding marijuana industry. And then there's also a potash mine being developed, $1 billion development, and there's a small plastics manufacturer in that town as well. This town doesn't have any place to live. They got more jobs than people, and people are having to drive from 50 miles away because there's simply no place, and we just don't have a lot of policies focused on workforce housing to make that a viable growth for a town like that, much less in inner ring suburbs of Detroit.
Right. And so really quickly, because we have some questions mounting up for our panelists, but I do want to give you guys a chance to answer that same question as to how would Michigan residents feel the success of us doing the correct thing when it comes to our investments and what our future outlook is going to be. Well, Britany, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a tough question. And the truth is they probably won't see it for a while. It will have a lag time for that. One of the questions you had asked us earlier was, what are some of the roadblocks or barriers to future progress? One of the things I'm going to shine a light on that I think is really a good thing. This past year we had incredible bipartisan support to pass in record time an incentives package to attract key projects to the state. We can do it. We know we can. That's proof of concept. We probably need to then take that next step and start to play the long game. We're not particularly good at that in Michigan. Life sciences corridor and so on. There are some examples we can point to, but we could be good at it. It's just going to require that not everyone's going to feel the benefits equally at the same time. But we have to make every effort to ensure wherever we're making these investments and planning for the future, that everyone will eventually benefit, and that we recognize that we're all in this together. We're not Southeast Michigan. We're not West Michigan. We're not the UP. We're Michigan, and certainly diversifying geographically those benefits is going to be really important. But again, we got to play the long game. We got to have. What about $1 billion incentive package for talent and improving our talent position? So that's one big piece.
And finally, Jennifer, your thoughts on how Michiganders might feel the correct path being taken, again, at a time where it seems like we are so close to seizing certain opportunities that we may not get again.
Yeah, I think it ultimately comes down to three basic things, and I make it sound basic. It's obviously much more complex than that, but it comes down to good jobs with competitive wages. It comes down to investing in people, whether that's the supports that they need, and building strong communities. And if we can leverage these opportunities to accomplish those three things, good jobs with wages, investing in people, and building communities, the rest will fall into place. And I know I'm oversimplifying it a lot, not just a bit, but it really to Britany's point, we come up with each new change in administration, we have new programs and new focus and new investment, and then we change the legislature, and then it happens in DC as well. And we've not developed a long-term sustainable strategy around how the state intends to invest in workforce development, economic development, longer term. And that's been one of, our missions here in Oakland is, really making sure that people know that the workforce system is here. It's accessible. It's easy to use. You can call, you can email, you can reach out to a career advisor at any point, because people do need to see the benefit. It's what's in it for me. How will this change my circumstances? How will this change my family? How will this change my future? And we all have a responsibility to do that.
Right, exactly. So again, there are a lot of things we didn't get a chance to touch on. Obviously, we can talk about this till we're blue in the face, because these are things that are in progress that we're currently working on. So with that said, we will move on to some of the questions that we have coming in. Britany, I'm going to give this first one to you from Glenn on Facebook. He says, we're not ranked or known as a tech hub, but he wants to know what your thoughts are on how we might move the needle on being known as a tech hub.
I might push back a little bit in that I think, being the home to the auto industry, and we are still very much the home, more so than even where it's growing in other parts of the state. I mean, that is definitely a tech hub for that field. But I understand the question, and there are a number of things that we can do, a better harnessing of our research institutions, our industry that are doing research, and our communities. And so we have some great examples. There are innovation districts. There are 4 coming online. One's actually already online and has been operating for years in Detroit. Medical Mile in Grand Rapids is a great example. There are other ones around the state. I won't try to name them all off, but growing those and having those as centers for innovation that bring together the innovation, the private sector, talent, those are really key.
Right. So our next question is also from Facebook, Jenna, and Jennifer, I'll let you field this one. What is the value to the future workplace of degrees that aren't related to the hard tech skills or engineering? So she's asking, how could grads in liberal arts have a future in Michigan?
Well, I think, the important thing to understand about education is it's lifelong learning. And so even if it's a liberal arts degree, there's still the opportunity to, use that as a base to transition into high-tech careers. And we still need arts majors, right? And I think that's where we maybe got a little bit off track in Michigan, was that we went from everyone needs a 4-year degree to no one needs a 4-year degree. You can do the skilled trades. And now we're starting to see, post-secondary enrollment numbers dropping at a rate that is concerning. Completion rates are concerning. And so the conversation really needs to be, these are all of the options that you have to you. And it doesn't stop with a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree. So how do we create those career pathways for individuals to say, okay, I'm going to start as a medical assistant certificate, and then I'm going to go for my associate's degree as a LPN, and then I'll continue to a bachelor's degree for an RN, and then I'll become a nurse anesthetist, and laying out those career pathways. And we have a lot of great partners. That's something we're so fortunate about in Michigan is, great partnerships with economic development, with post-secondary education, with our universities, our community colleges, our nonprofit organizations. We have all of the pieces there. A lot of it is just a communication challenge, and part of our effort under Oakland 80 is to really inspire people that post-secondary education, no matter where they're at in life, if they're a recent graduate, if they're an immigrant to the area, if they are an adult that started college and didn't complete, that we have opportunities and options for you.
Right. So we're coming up on time, unfortunately. I can't wait to do this again, by the way. But Chad, I will leave this last question to you, because it is one that I think sometimes we can forget to acknowledge when we're having this conversation about workforce development, talent development, where people need to be, getting these degrees and things like that. Kenyon on Facebook is asking, is it possible? Can you make a living in a service economy for growth in a middle class? So if I'm understanding his question correctly, can you still make it to the middle class if you're working in a service industry? Is that possible? And Chad, we got 5 minutes, so tell me what you think.
Yeah, you can make it, but there is a slower growth. I mean, if you get into an electrician journeyman track, you can make a pretty good living. There's just the problem with this notion that we need more. We don't go to college. You need more people to go become plumbers. We only need so many plumbers. I mean, there is a max on plumbers at some point in the economy. But right now, like, we cannot get enough people to write software code in this state right now. My girlfriend is an executive at a small Grand Rapids e-commerce company. They haven't hired a developer inside the state of Michigan in 3 years. They can't find anybody. They're competing with General Motors at a conference a few months ago, to a tech conference, to try to out of state to try to recruit people, and she set up right across the hallway in the convention center from Rocket Mortgage. I mean, a small 50 employee company out of Grand Rapids trying to compete with this behemoth in Detroit that will, you can live anywhere. You want to live in Aspen and write code for Rocket Mortgage? Sure, yeah, go ahead. And that's the name of the game now. And so, yes, we do need people to work in the service industry. One key stat we haven't talked about: in Southeast Michigan, there are 800,000 living, breathing adults between ages of 25 and 60 right now who have gone to college and not finished. These are the folks who have the potential to get retrained, to learn a new skill, even in their 40s or even in their early 50s, because we know people, are working longer. As a society, we haven't saved, and several generations have not saved as their parents did. So they're going to be working almost till 70, if not longer. And so there is a trajectory here where there's plenty of opening and growth for people to get retrained, even in older age, and learn a new skill and adapt to a changing economy, because otherwise you are pretty much kind of restrained to working in the service sector. And yes, the service sector has definitely grown tremendously, but that's also why we have so many families, majority of families in the state who live below this, what's known as ALICE. They're employed, they're working every day, but they just don't make enough to make ends meet to support a family and such. And so they're living on the edge, paycheck to paycheck. And so, back to just one thing about college real quickly. I'm sitting in my dad's office in Chelsea. He's a small businessman. This is like his fourth career in the construction business. He went to college at Iowa State University to become a farmer. He grew up in the suburbs of Pittsburgh and went to Iowa State, got an agriculture degree, was a farmer for a while on the family farm in Missouri, and then changed careers a couple times over, worked in school administration, and now he's a small businessman. So I sometimes tell people, like, you just do not know where your life is going to go in your career and what kind of work trajectory. But as my dad always said, you got to learn how to learn, and that's what you do when you go to college and you get that degree, because that stays with you, whether you're a farmer or doing something else completely different.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with.
Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. I agree. Yeah, I agree with Chad. I mean, it's all about seizing the opportunities that are presented to you. And I think if you talk to most adults, the job that they're in is not something that they envisioned being in when they were in middle school or high school. And we're doing a better job in Michigan of integrating those career pathways and education options and helping middle school and high school students start to think about those career pathways. but we also have to inspire them to understand, and Britany said it best, that careers aren't linear, right? It's all about, you start here and then you might jump as other opportunities become available. So workforce development, education, all of those pieces are critical to not just individual success, but economic success. And we just have to all work better together across those pillars, education, business, and government, to see how we can move the needle forward across the state.
Right. Britany, we'll leave it to you. Your last thoughts.
I want to leave on a positive. I mean, it's always good to know what you're up against, but here's what we are the envy in many ways. We have these amazing institutions, my 3 universities, the universities across the state, very diverse landscape of higher ed. And we've got really strong government in the county level and the state level entities like Michigan Works that can help us. And these are assets, if we try to build them from scratch, would probably not be very successful. They're here and we can leverage them. And we are a creative group of people here in the state. And so we need to come together and play the long game. And I think we can.
Right. Well, thank you guys for joining me. That will do it for this month's Future of Work Town Hall. Thank you to Chad Livengood of Crain's Detroit Business, Britany Affolter-Caine of the University Research Corridor, and Jennifer Llewellyn of Oakland County Michigan Works for the conversation. Make sure to come back for next month's Future of Work Town Hall. Head to the One Detroit website for more information. Follow us on social media and sign up for our weekly newsletter. I'm Will Glover, and I'll see you in the future. Thanks.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.
Support for this program is provided by